Okay, today I want to show you different ways that we can represent data. So here we have some data. I surveyed some students, we'll call it Class 7 Maths A, and I asked them how many siblings they had, so how many brothers and sisters they had. And this was my data from that survey. So first things first, I want to fill out a frequency distribution table that we learned about in the last lesson. So let me grab my texter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this raw data into my frequency distribution table. So the first student had 3 siblings, so I'm going to put a tally mark there. Second student had 2, third student had 1, then 2, then 5, then 0, then 1, 0 again, 1, 2, 2, 4, 0, 2, and I put a line across because I'm at the 5th one now, so 2, 2, and 3. Okay, cool. So I've done all my tally marks using my raw data. Now I'm going to count how many tally marks there were in each column, and I'm going to write that number for the frequency here. So there were 1, 2, 3. 3 students had no siblings. 1, 2, 3, 4 had 1 sibling. 6 students had 2 siblings. 2 students had 3 siblings. 1 student had 4 and 1 student had 5. So now we're going to put our total down the bottom. So 3 plus 4 is 7, plus 6 is 13, 15, 16, 17. And I might double check that I didn't miss any scores by counting these ones up here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Perfect. Okay, cool. And now what I want to do is I want to create a frequency histogram and polygon. Ridiculous names, I know. But it's just like a way of showing, like a chart, to show our results rather than having them in a table. Often people like to look at a diagram or like a chart rather than a table. Makes it more interesting to look at, I think. So here I have put a label on my chart, or my graph is another word that we use to describe it. I've put a label up here, and it's important to make sure that you have a label or a title up here. We also need to label our axes. Okay, so the one across the bottom is what our scores were, so the different possible options that people could have chosen from. So that's going to go along our x-axis. So that's what we call this one here. They go along the horizontal axis. So I've just labeled 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 because those were our different options. If we were doing categorical data and I was asking favorite colors, I'd be putting the different options down here. So blue, green, yellow, whatever. Okay? And then I also need to have a label down here to say what these numbers represent. So it's like a title to say these numbers are showing the number of siblings that students have. Whereas our y-axis, which is this one going up here, our vertical axis, that is the frequency. So that's how many votes each of these got. So we just write the word frequency and then also the numbers. Because my highest frequency was 6, I only have to have my graph go up to 6. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to go along, see how my 0 score had 3 people vote for it. So for 0, I'm going to go up to 3 and I'm going to put a little line across here. Then I'm going to bring my box, I'm going to basically draw a box like a column graph, I suppose, and I want it to go halfway between this option and the next option, like that, so that when I draw my next one, it can share that same line, if you know what I mean. Okay, so I've done 0 because it had 3, so it's gone up to 3. So now I'm going to do 4 for number 1. So number 1, I'm going to go up to 4, and I'm going to draw a line across about that far. Looks good. Then I'm going to bring these lines down, bring it back down to the bottom. There we go. See how rather than having individually spaced columns, they're sharing a line? Okay, now let's do 2. So 2 had 6 votes. So I'm going to go up to 6, draw a line across, bring it down. Mind you, when you do this, you'll be using graph paper, so it'll be much easier. Your columns will actually be the same width, which is kind of what you want. I'm just doing this freehand, so it will look a bit wonky. And then number 3 has 2 votes. So 2's here, across, and down. 4 had 1 vote. And then 5 also had 1 as well. There you go. So you'll notice how there's a gap here in between my y-axis and where my first column actually starts. There is a gap here, and I've also left a gap at the end, and I'll show you why. So this first part of what we've just drawn just now is called a frequency histogram. Weird word, I don't know, it's just a graph. But yeah, it is important to leave a gap there and for there to be no gaps in between your columns. Okay, cool. I'm going to change colors so you can see this one a bit better. Now I'm going to do a polygon, a frequency polygon. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my different color. You may choose to do yours in the same color. And I'm going to put a dot right in the center of each of these columns, like this. Right in the center, nice and big, like that. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect the dots. So I'm going to draw a line that goes up here, connect these ones. You'll be using a ruler. You're not going to be doing yours freehand like I am. Cool. So, okay, now I'm going to finish this off by drawing a line connecting my first dot to the very corner of the graph. Because remember how I left a gap like that? And then I'm going to do the same over here. So I'm going to connect my last dot to the corner of the graph. So that's why I left a gap. I left a space between the beginning of my graph and the y-axis. Okay, so that way I could draw my line that connects down to the corner, and same over here. So when you draw your frequency histogram, the key things to remember is you need to leave a gap between where your columns start and your y-axis. You need to make sure that you label your axes with what is actually being graphed on there. You need to make sure that you don't have a gap between your columns. They're just going to share the same, like this line here is shared by both number 1 and number 2. And then you're going to draw a line graph, essentially, with dots in the center of each column, and you're going to connect those into the corners and between each one. Okay, so cool. So this is a good way of representing this data, because without having to count tallies and read boxes and stuff, we straight away know, wow, okay, a lot of people have 2 siblings. It's really easy to analyze when it's in graph form. It looks nicer too, I think, than just a boring old table. Okay, so this is one way that we can represent this data. Let's have a look at another way that we can represent this data.